Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, April 9th, 2025. My name is Bart Warner. I have the privilege of serving as the town manager of Bedford, and I want to welcome you to this edition of the Best Little Town Podcast, designed to give citizens, businesses, and other interested parties a deeper dive into the activities of town council. We get together in this format the day after council when they meet to cover the action that they've taken and also to provide a little bit more background information. And let's get right to it. Last night, council spent quite a bit of time working on several things. Prior to the regular meeting, there was a work session dealing with the fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget. That will be presented at our next meeting, which will be April 22nd at 7 o'clock p.m. But kind of give you all some of the background there. There were a few items that we needed to follow up on, that we needed to tweak before presenting the budget publicly. The way we conduct our business is by separate funds. The general fund is the primarily tax-supported activities. Those are things like police, planning, administrative items that are not covered by fees that cover their cost other than taxes. They're the typical government related activities, and that's the way they're identified each year in the audit. Good news, we think it's good news, is we have balanced the budget in the general fund without a tax increase this year. We're going to have the same rates for real estate and personal property that we have in the current year. That's also covered in the meeting agenda, which we'll talk about a bit later. We're also able to deal with some strategic planning things. A little bit of background. The town was a city once upon a time. I know there are some new folks who aren't familiar with that process, but we were a city up until 2013, and we negotiated to change our status to that of a town. If you're really interested in talking more about what that means, I'll be happy to do that personally, because I'm kind of a government nerd and it's my job. But the outcome of that is several things. We gave up certain functions that were duplicated by both the city and the county. We also negotiated several services, which I'll talk about a little bit later, that the former city provided that either were taken over by the county or that were negotiated in some way, shape, or form. One of the things that was an outcome of the reversion was the fact that, based on the way the state allocates money for schools, it was beneficial to Bedford County in that they were able to use the funding matrix for the old city that actually resulted in more state aid for a period of 15 years. And they were generous enough to share some of that windfall for 15 years with the town, which means that both the county and the town receive some additional revenues from 2013 to 2028 that we otherwise would not receive. For our purposes, that amounts to a payment of $750,000 each year. We've received that beginning in 2013, and it goes away in 2028. And even though we're a couple of years away from that happening, we are taking steps to account for that loss of revenue that will happen in a couple of years. And the way in which we're doing that is kind of a five-fold plan. One is we are seeing some growth, new development, new construction. That does generate new revenue in the form of real estate and personal property taxes. And again, we'll mention this a little bit later, we're already seeing some benefits of that increase in assessment already, even though a lot of the residential development that has been approved isn't actually out of the ground yet. The second part of the plan for the $750,000 relates to realizing some economy and efficiencies in our operations. That means we're kind of changing the way we're doing things to reduce our costs. That means changes in service, elimination of some services, and reassignment of personnel. The next factor involved in that $750,000 figure is the fact that the town will be debt-free within 2 years. Currently, our debt payment is not terribly onerous. It's about $200,000 a year, but that will go off the books in a couple of years, which will help us account for the loss of that $750,000. The other aspect that we are looking at to try to recover that cost is we have reapplied our business professional license tax. That is a tax that is basically charged on businesses within limits of cities and towns primarily. We did away with that tax in 2013, and based on the need to address this shortfall that will be coming up in a few years and questions about the relative benefit of that tax holiday, we have been slowly re-implementing that. So a couple of years ago, we brought the tax back on large businesses, primarily those with $3 million or more in gross assets or gross sales. Last year, and we just implemented this, we expanded that a little bit more to capture more businesses. Those would be $2 million and above. In the current year budget, we're talking about expanding that fully to businesses with receipts of $250,000 and above. One thing I want folks to keep in mind is it is expanding the tax burden on our businesses. However, the rates that we charge are actually lower than our neighboring jurisdictions. And frankly, these are taxes that most of the cities and towns around us, actually all the cities and towns around us, and the counties who are eligible to do so have been charging. The average rate that those localities charge is 20 cents per $100 of gross sales. Our rate is 10 cents. So even though we are expanding the reach of our taxes, we are doing so at a relatively lower rate. And we also, again, are doing that for purposes of getting ahead of this loss of revenue rather than deal with it later. The other source of funding we have to offset that loss of revenue is prior year reserves. We have a cash management policy that we follow that says we try to maintain at least 25% of our total general fund expenditure level in our reserves, which can be viewed as kind of a rainy day fund, if you will. Since our general fund typically amounts to about $10 million a year, that figure that we absolutely have to meet is $2.5 million. As of today, we have $4.3 million in the bank. So again, those are reserves to guard against emergencies or catastrophic events that we hope don't happen anyway, but also to help us leverage against things like losses of revenue. So our goal is to use an approach of all 5 of these strategies to deal with this $750,000 loss that's looming. Based on our projections, if we can follow through with this year's budget proposal, we will be in good shape and will be fairly balanced, all things considered, through 2029. And at that point, if we did nothing else, we would start to see a deficit accumulating again, which we would then be positioned to address. So you might hear a little bit about the B poll tax, as it's called. That is being expanded, but it is being done in a way that is a lower rate than what's around us. And we do regret having to assess any form of tax collection, to be perfectly honest. But in this case, the justification is we don't want to be caught later and have to then foist a burden on the taxpayers in a couple of years when we know it's coming and we can get ahead of it. We also talked quite a bit about our electric fund. We operate our own electric system here in town, and that is done on kind of a business-like basis. It is an enterprise fund, which means that it is wholly supported by charges for service. And so it's run like a business, and we have the same challenges and concerns as all electricity providers currently. It's a difficult time, as we've talked about before. Costs of electricity are going up. The primary reason for this is that the demand for electricity, particularly the way it's used with data centers and things like that, has far outpaced generation. Of course, there have been some regulatory changes dealing with the way power can be generated, but the long and the short of it is that we're not generating as much power as we need. And so that is increasing costs. The fact that we're behind makes it difficult because putting any kind of generating facility into operation requires clearing the regulatory hurdles first and then actually constructing things. So there's some lead time there. I say all that to explain that we are facing an increased cost in our electric budget as of July 1st of $2 million that relates directly to this cost. In our budget, this is identified as a capacity cost. It is charged to us by the agency that regulates the grid itself. PJM is the operation that oversees connectivity, makes sure that the lines are appropriate and functioning, makes sure that investment is happening appropriately. And in this case, since there's been a lack of generation, all electric providers within the PJM system are being assessed essentially a penalty for not keeping up. The idea is that contributing more money to the pool of available resources will encourage development of more generating capacity. In the short run, it means that the businesses that are actually generating power will probably get a little bit richer in the short term because the value of what they have is going up as a simple matter of economics. The town of Bedford does purchase most of its power from other sources. However, we do generate power in the form of our Snowden hydroelectric plant, a solar generation facility that we have franchised here within town. And we also have ownership rights to facilities in Ohio and Illinois that are natural gas based. We also purchase wind power from a wind farm in Pennsylvania. So the fact that we are leveraged somewhat means that as bad as that $2 million charge is, it could be worse if we hadn't planned ahead to reduce some of that cost. Alice Wolf from the Blue Ridge Power Agency addressed that issue last month at one of our council meetings, and I would encourage you to go back and look at the YouTube records of the video of that meeting or the minutes of the meeting to get more details there. That's the most significant challenge that's facing us with the electric fund this year. The budget we are proposing involves a proposal for the town to absorb half of that cost. Again, it's $2 million. In addition to the general fund having a cash reserve policy, the electric fund also has a reserve policy. The requirement there is about $5 million. As of today, we have about $9 million in the bank. So the proposal before council is for us to use $1 million of that reserve to offset the cost, but then to pass along the other half to the customers, which will be reflected in your bills, unfortunately. Also, we talked about our solid waste fund, which has been a separate fund for years, although we are looking to bring that back more into the general fund as a government activity. We talked last time about our commercial solid waste collection service and the fact that we are behind in recovering those costs. The nature of solid waste collection is twofold. First, there is the collection phase, which we see as customers when we put our rollout containers at the curb and the workers come and take the trash away. Once it's on that truck, it then has to be taken somewhere else. In our case, for residential trash, all of that trash goes to the Bedford County landfill. And based on our reversion agreement, that is done at no cost whatsoever to the town. So the $25 a month charge that you see on your utility bill for residential services does pretty well capture our costs there, mainly because we don't have a disposal fee. However, on the commercial side, and that's anything that's not residential, by the way, we charge a fee for collection that is supposed to cover all of the costs. However, whereas we have no cost for disposal on the residential side, we do have a cost on the commercial side that's in the form of a transfer station where we collect all of the non-residential trash and then have to take it somewhere else. We do have to pay to dispose of that. Currently, based on the rates that we are charged, it's more cost effective for us to take that all the way to Pittsylvania County to their landfill. That works because we have an agreement with another hauler who commingles their commercial with our commercial trash at the transfer station, and they haul it to Pennsylvania for free. So that has a value of about $180,000 that we've been able to avoid. However, the cost of maintaining the transfer station itself, all things considered, represents an annual cost of about $400,000. That is borne by about 190 commercial accounts. And when you do the math related to all that, it means that the average cost for our commercial customers far exceeds the revenue that we are collecting. Based on that factor, as well as the fact that we are aware of private haulers that can provide the exact same service, the recommendation is for the town to discontinue commercial trash collection services. There was discussion at last council meeting about contracting that out, but in talking to our attorneys and looking at the structure of that, contracting out does not absolve us of our need to operate the transfer station, which again is the long-term goal of eliminating at least $200,000 and possibly $400,000 of costs. Simply put, we talked about this at the work session last night. For the town to continue in the commercial trash collection service, in addition to the cost of the transfer station itself, we're aware of an issue with the scale associated with that needs to be repaired at a cost of upwards of $200,000. The town would have to significantly increase the solid waste fees it charges to all customers in order to balance that cost. Consequently, it was a consensus of council to proceed with simply withdrawing from the commercial collection business. That was also on the advice of our town attorney. We will be sending out letters to all of our commercial customers explaining the rationale and the purpose. And also, we cannot recommend specific companies based on procurement laws and other competition rules that we have to abide by. But we are aware of private haulers such as Bays Brothers, Republic, and Waste Management, just to cite a few examples, who may be able to pick up that service. Again, council started at 5:30 p.m. talking about those matters. They worked right up till a few minutes before the regular meeting, and we did get the guidance we needed to present the fiscal year 25-26 budget, which we will do in detail at our next regular meeting on April 22nd. So that was the work that council did before their regularly scheduled meeting. Last night's regular meeting began at 7 o'clock p.m., and we had a very robust agenda last night. Finally getting to that, I'm just going to kind of go through it as it's listed. Of course, the first item is approval of our minutes. We record all of the minutes of all of our meetings. For the public meetings, such as regular council meetings, we always record those by video. We broadcast those live, and they're available to review later. For things like committee meetings and work sessions, we do not do a live video or recorded video of those. However, we do record minutes, and those are also available because they're public meetings. I'll speak more about that in just a minute. Once the minutes were approved from our previous meetings, it was time for my report. I touched on a few items last night, one of which was the fact that people probably noticed some very beautiful works of art on our downtown light poles last month. That was in conjunction with Youth Art Month, which takes place every year in March through a national arts program. The banners that were displayed on the light poles downtown were original works of art created by students within the Bedford County Public School System, and that is in a program coordinated by Ms. Leslie Overstreet Bowyer. I was remiss in not mentioning that last month, but we want to extend thanks to Mrs. Bowyer and all the students who produced such such wonderful displays that really brightened up the downtown during the month of March. Also want to thank my colleagues in the Public Works Department who actually did the work to install those displays and also took them down at the end of the month. I also began last night by mentioning that Shannon Walker, our captain with our police department, has been serving as the interim chief while we conducted the hiring process to bring a new chief permanently on board. And that was kind of a segue to announce the fact that we do have a new police chief, Mr. Jim Moore, who was sworn in on Monday. He's on the job. He's well qualified. He's hit the ground running, and we are very grateful to have him as a member of our leadership team. He was present at the meeting last night and stood up, and we were able to introduce him personally. Would encourage you to get to know Chief Moore. He's excited to be here and wants to do good things for the community. And something that's kind of been an echo of things at every meeting, council recognizes the people who make an effort to physically attend the meetings. That is very appreciated and also very important because oftentimes there are a lot of questions about what your town government's doing. This podcast is an effort to address that, but the single best way to get information about official town action is to attend the meetings or to monitor them as they occur. Any action taken by council has to be basically executed at the regular meetings. There are very rare, matter of fact, I can't really think of any exceptions to that. So if you ever have a question about town policy or something that you hear might be going on, it's been discussed and vetted at a council meeting, and we can probably direct you to the resources to find that. Again, if you can't make it in person, you can watch them live on live stream through YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, search Town of Bedford, Virginia. If you can't do it live, they're also archived on that website, and they're all available. So again, I know last month Alice Wolf joined us, and I referenced that. So would encourage you to go back and get more information if you're not familiar with the basics of this $2 million charge that I just mentioned. Beyond that, we keep written minutes of all meetings, and those are also available online at our website, www.bedfordva.gov. Click on Government and then Agendas and Minutes, and you'll see a list of several meetings, including the Planning Commission, Housing Redevelopment Authority, and Town Council, and you can access those, which are indexed by year. And of course, in addition, I host this podcast each Wednesday. If you are not listening live, it can be accessed online at mediasquatch.com. In the main menu, just click on Local Podcasts and then Best Little Town. I mention that because, again, it's very important to us to do our best to make people aware of what's happening because it does have impact, and we're sensitive to that. And also, we appreciate the fact that we don't have all the answers, and we appreciate the input of folks who share their good ideas with us and provide guidance. Oftentimes in the dialogue that results, we may have to come to conclusions that do not satisfy everybody or may contain information that's difficult to hear, but that makes it even more important to be open and transparent so as to avoid misunderstandings. Moving on to the rest of the agenda, we had a couple of appearances before council. Reverend David Whitehurst, who is a citizen and also pastor of a church, spoke to council and thanked them very much for their service, referenced a word of scripture from Proverbs related to public service, and also offered prayer on behalf of the town council and its staff. Jen Cohn of 3677 Forest Road also spoke to council. She identified herself as a farmer's market volunteer and also operator of a local nursery business in town. She mentioned that April is Autism Awareness Month, and there will be a formal event recognizing that this Saturday morning at the farmer's market. And Ms. Cohn's son, Max, is going to be prominently featured in that. Max is a young man who is autistic, but is very active in our community. And actually, he appeared before council about a month or so ago to note that he is currently undertaking an initiative personally to conduct random acts of kindness throughout the community. And we've seen some evidence of that already. And if you see Max with some flowers in his hand, that's what he's doing. So we appreciated Jen mentioning that, and also the attention to Autism Awareness Month this month in April. Council comments, they went around the dais, beginning with Councilman Dave Foster, who thanked everyone for coming out and welcomed Chief Moore to the staff. Councilman Dwight Evans echoed those sentiments and also thanked Reverend Whitehurst for his prayer. Vice Mayor Updike echoed all three sentiments expressed by the prior gentleman. Councilman Stacey Haley also expressed his appreciation for everyone who came out and also thanked staff for their efforts in general and also the excellent work they're doing with the spring cleanup efforts. Councilman Todd Foreman echoed those sentiments, particularly the spring cleanup staff effort, and also expressed his personal appreciation to Captain Walker for serving as an interim and personally welcomed Chief Jim Moore. Councilman Jay Ippolito expressed his appreciation for Chief Moore joining our staff. And I can't read my own handwriting, but Jay also mentioned some efforts by staff and just his general appreciation for the community. Mayor Stanley, in his comments, also welcomed Chief Moore and noted that he participated in the opening day ceremony for baseball this past Saturday. I don't know if it was part of that. I'm looking at my notes. He also had an encounter with Amherst Mayor Dwayne Tuggle and expressed that he's forming a relationship with him, which is good. Those relationships with other people in similar positions in local government are beneficial for so many reasons, not just for fellowship and support, but they do lead to collaborative efforts, and we have several of those throughout the region and beyond. Mayor Stanley also recognized Stacey Haley for being elected to a leadership position in the local Elks Lodge. Mr. Haley was recently elected exalted ruler of the Elks Lodge, and we appreciate his involvement in the community and his leadership there. There were no revisions to the agenda, so we moved into public hearings, which we had several. The first public hearing dealt with the proposed tax rates for the upcoming fiscal years. That relates to the real estate tax rate of 28 cents per $100 of assessed valuation and the personal property tax rate of not more than $1.06 per $100 assessed valuation. Also, we have a machinery and tools tax, but we set that at a rate of 1/1,000,000th of a cent. There's some discussion about that later, which we'll get to, but all of these tax rates are consistent with the current year. There are no increases proposed there, and there were no comments during this particular public hearing. The next public hearings dealt with a proposed development adjacent to the Governor's Hill area in the southwestern quadrant of town. There were three separate hearings. The first dealt with a zoning amendment with proffers from low-density residential to high-density residential for single-family detached and townhouse development uses on smaller lots. That primarily dealt with the proposal to construct up to 149 single-family homes and 97 townhomes on the area adjacent between the Governor's Hill development and Burks Hill Road. There were several people who spoke as part of that public hearing. It began with a presentation from Mr. Jamie White, who represents the developer. He provided some details regarding the proposed mix of single-family and townhome uses that the builder is looking to construct. The next speaker was Cindy Watson, who had submitted a letter in addition to her comments. Her concerns related primarily to making sure that a new connection to this neighborhood is actually executed. Previous proposals had all of the traffic passing back through the Governor's Hill neighborhood. The latest proposal features a new entrance and a connection to Burks Hill Road. She also shared concerns about the proposed office and model home associated with this new development and its location. Expressed concerns about increased traffic in general, and make no mistake, as we do grow and welcome new neighbors, we will see increased traffic on our streets. Just want people to be aware of that. It's not something that is really debatable. You have more folks, more cars, and the same streets, we're going to see more congestion. She also noted the fact that the developers are proposing to grant some additional property to adjacent developers as part of their proposal, and also addressed some runoff concerns that were present in previous phases of Governor's Hill, and to make sure that those did not happen this time around as well. Next speaker was Dale Brunig of 1247 Emerald Crest Drive. He noted his opposition to higher density residential development. He did appreciate the addition of a second point of access, but he wanted to make sure that the contracts for purchase of those properties were completed and verified. The next speaker was Ms. Rhonda Miles of 1251 Emerald Crest Drive. She also noted she appreciated the addition of a second entrance onto Burks Hill Road. She did express concern about existing roads being torn up as part of construction of the proposed new facility, and would like to see some traffic studies done on the impact of that. Also, she expressed concern about impact on water and sewer systems, and expressed her view that she would prefer to see manufacturing and business growth in the community rather than high-density residential growth. The final speaker at this public hearing was Mark Rodinas of 1089 Moneta Road. He understood that progress is necessary. He noted that the second entrance, other than traveling back through Governor's Hill, would impact his property directly as he is adjacent to it. He noted that he has spoken with the developer, who has expressed willingness to accommodate his concerns, but mainly he wanted to make sure that, given that this is likely to be a long-term construction process, that they could minimize the impact on all adjacent owners as that takes place. The next public hearing on the agenda related to a conditional use permit for a sales office and model home with parking that would be associated with the overall proposed development. Mr. Jamie White, on behalf of the developer, again gave background information about this specific aspect and this separate conditional use request. Cindy Watson spoke as part of this public hearing and noted that her additional comments that she had made previously probably indicated a need for the developer to consider forming a homeowners association for this new development if it were approved, and asked for that to be taken under consideration. Rhonda Miles also spoke as part of this public hearing, expressed her concern about impact on Burks Hill Road traffic, and asked for consideration to be given to traffic control measures such as stoplights and or turning lanes. The next public hearing related to a lot located on Burks Hill Road that is being purchased to provide access for this overall project, and also includes the proposal for townhouse development within this district. Mr. Jamie White presented information about this particular parcel and the plans there on behalf of the developer again. Mr. Dale Brunig also spoke as part of this public hearing and noted his opposition to high-density development of the type proposed for this lot, and stated his preference that we keep single-family, lower-density development instead. Those public hearings concluded. We did then have two additional public hearings for conditional use request permits from Philip and Barbara Raintree, who are requesting homestay uses on properties they own at 926 Lake Drive and also 1135 Lakeview Lane. Those were taken up separately. In both cases, Mr. and Mrs. Raintree presented background information about each property and their plans. There were no other speakers at either public hearing. And with that, that portion of the agenda was complete, and we moved on to new business. The first item being an ordinance adopting tax rates for fiscal year 25-26. Again, we're not proposing to increase our rates at all from what they are this year in terms of real estate. Town Council, on a motion by Stacy Haley, seconded by Todd Foreman, voted unanimously to adopt the ordinance establishing the real estate tax rate for fiscal year 25-26 at 28 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. The next item of new business dealt with the personal property tax. This is a separate tax that's authorized by the Code of Virginia that, as the name implies, relates to certain things like tangible personal property, such as vehicles, things of that nature, with the exception of certain household goods and certain things related primarily to agricultural uses that are defined within the state code. Also, the things that are outside of that, including machinery and tools and certain waivers that are applied to veterans, are taxed at a rate that is so minimal that it is practically zero. Also, we note that we do write off certain things for veterans and certain things related to vehicles. Council ultimately adopted the ordinance establishing the personal property tax rate for calendar year 2025 at the same rates as we currently charge. That was a motion made by Councilman Dave Foster, seconded by Councilman Dwight Evans. Vice Mayor Darrell Updike did note the machinery and tools tax and the fact that it is set at a rate of 1/1,000,000th of a cent per $100. That goes back to the town's reversion from city status. The machinery and tools tax is a tax that the town would still be authorized to collect. However, at the time of reversion, it was determined that the county also collects this tax, and there's a lot of questions and concerns about perceptions of double taxation. So going back to 2013, they set the tax rate at a very minimal rate that frankly does not collect any revenue. But they did that so in case the town ever needed to revisit that issue as part of its revenue requirements, we could do so rather than getting rid of the tax entirely. And that was part of the discussion that took place, raised by Vice Mayor Updike, and I think everybody appreciated that clarification. The next item of new business relates to personal property tax relief. This goes back to 1998 when the General Assembly adopted a policy that was geared toward eliminating the car tax, the personal property tax on personal use motor vehicles. That was espoused by a certain candidate for governor who was ultimately successful. But by 2004, the General Assembly revised that philosophy and capped the contribution from the Commonwealth to localities for reimbursement for personal property taxes. Basically, the state provides $280,000 to the town to offset personal property tax. This is primarily on vehicles. The town applies that by waiving the tax on the first $20,000 of assessed value for vehicles. So basically, the $1.06 per hundred only applies on the portion of your vehicle that is above $20,000. So if you own a vehicle that is assessed at less than $20,000, you do not receive a bill, or you receive a bill indicating that no tax is due. Council adopted the resolution to apply this tax relief in the manner stated. Again, the state provides $280,000 of relief. That motion was made by Councilman Todd Foreman and seconded by Councilman Stacey Haley. Councilman Dave Foster made a point to clarify that the state provides $280,000 to provide tax relief, but based on the town's policy of not taxing the first $20,000 in value, that the town also essentially chips in over $200,000 itself to offset that tax rate. So again, nobody enjoys paying taxes, but it was important for Mr. Foster to raise the point that the town is doing its best to keep those at a low rate and also to provide appropriate relief when and where it can. The next item of new business related to some electric capital expenditures. This relates to several items. We are approaching the end of our fiscal year, which runs from July 1st to June 30th. Based on the way the current budget is structured, anytime the electric department has to expend money for capital, they do need to get this kind of permission from council. Last night's request totaled about $350,000. It involved switch replacements at various locations throughout the electric system, acquisition of commercial meters, integration of outage sensors into the SCADA system, underground circuit replacements, and internal fiber system extension to the Snowden hydroelectric plant. Again, these are all primarily operational things, but they kind of carry a high cost given the nature of the business. And the electric department did request to expend the remainder of the money set aside for these in the current fiscal year. On a motion made by Councilman Haley and seconded by Councilman Foster, this item was also unanimously approved by council. The next item of new business was the rezoning that would be necessary for the proposed development adjacent to the Governor's Hill development. Again, we're talking about 149 single-family homes and 97 townhomes that could be constructed, as well as several proffers related to an additional access point, and as well as other items meant to address infrastructure and traffic impacts there. There was quite a bit of discussion about that. I'm not going to attempt to recap all of it. Again, I'd encourage you to watch the video or consult the minutes when they're posted. Ultimately, on a motion by Councilman Stacey Haley, seconded by Vice Mayor Darrell Updike, council did vote unanimously to rezone the tax parcels to allow for the proposed development adjacent to Governor's Hill. The next item of new business related to a conditional use permit for a model home and office to be constructed in conjunction with the new development that was effectively approved by the previous item of new business. The Planning Commission had reviewed this and made a motion to recommend that use contingent on the rezoning, with conditions that the model home be moved to office lots closer to Burks Hill Road and away from the current Governor's Hill Road exit and entrance, and also that the hours of operation for the sales office would be limited to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and also by appointment only after 5 p.m. On a motion by Councilman Foreman, seconded by Councilman Haley, council did vote unanimously to adopt the resolution authorizing the permit for the model home and office for the new development, with the changes recommended by the Planning Commission as well. The next item of new business related to the parcel that is being constructed primarily to provide an additional access point to the new development that was approved. The Planning Commission had reviewed that and added only one condition, which was that the property transfer that will be necessary for the developer to obtain this access point and also to construct townhomes on it actually be executed before townhomes are built. On a motion by Vice Mayor Updike, seconded by Councilman Haley, they did add that condition to the approval of the proposal to construct townhomes on this particular parcel, but also said that no construction could occur until the property were actually transferred to ownership of the developers. So to summarize those last three items, the large vacant acreage adjacent to the Governor's Hill development has been the subject of a lot of discussion over the past couple of years. There have been a couple of proposals brought before council that were actually turned down. Last night, council did approve a development plan for that acreage that could include up to 149 single-family homes as well as 97 townhomes. Doing the math, that's almost 250 units total, which means as these things are built and occupied, we will likely be welcoming approximately 500 new residents to the community. Again, it's a pretty significant undertaking, and it's something that has been thoroughly vetted and deliberately discussed over the years. So last night's vote was pretty significant, and for more details, I would certainly encourage you again to revisit the official records of the meeting, both in written and video form. The last two items of new business related to the homestay use requested by Mr. and Mrs. Raintree at their properties at 926 Lake Drive and 1135 Lakeview Lane. Council, on a motion by Jay Ippolito and seconded by Todd Foreman, approved the conditional use permit for the homestay at 926 Lake Drive. And then on a motion by Councilman Evans, seconded by Vice Mayor Updike, they also approved the conditional use permit for the homestay at 1135 Lakeview Lane. That concluded the regular portion of the council meeting. With that business accomplished at about 9 o'clock p.m., which is a little bit later than usual for us, Mayor Stanley adjourned the meeting until 5:30 p.m. on April 22nd for a council work session. That work session will be dealing with some town-owned properties and council's discussion of their priorities for the use of those properties or, other intended activities related to that. One of the things that council's doing with these work sessions is we've developed a list of particular areas of focus, including parks, town-owned properties, center town concerns, and a lot of other things that we're meeting on separately throughout the year, with the idea that in October or thereabouts, council is going to get together and take all these and digest them in the form of a strategic plan. That's a process that's been identified as a real need for council for several years now, and there have been efforts to start that, but we're starting to refine that. And when you see the council's conducting these work sessions, understand that they're taking on a little bit extra burden than they signed on for, but the long-term purpose of that is to set priorities and define things and be clear about the progress and the plan for the town as it moves into the future. All these things from a staff perspective, I will say we appreciate greatly, because while in my case I have fairly endless responsibility, most of the authority I derive comes from council. So I appreciate it when they provide the specific direction, and we do our best to give them all the information they need to make decisions. So until next time when I join you, which should be here in a couple of weeks, I hope everyone is enjoying the beauty of spring. Look forward to enjoying the consistent temperatures of that, hopefully very soon. And as always, if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, comments, anything at all on your mind, please feel free to contact us at Town Hall. The main phone number there is 540-587-6001. Our business hours are Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Our treasurer's office does close at 4:30 p.m. on regular business days, so they can conduct the close of their daily transaction in their business, mainly in balancing the business that occurs over the day. Of course, my name is Bart Warner. I'm very privileged and grateful to serve as your town manager. You can reach me at 540-587-6001, or you can email me directly at bwarner@bedfordva.gov. There are a lot of changes happening in our community. We know there are a lot of opinions about that. We're happy to hear those, but all in all, we are moving forward and we are developing plans and clear trajectories to handle growth in a way that we hope is reasonable and in a way that does not overwhelm us. I will say, from a financial perspective, we're on solid ground, and as we talked to council last night during the budget work session, the good news is we're in a position where we have several options to consider, and we're not stuck with having to just simply take what comes our way. So that's involved a lot of effort by this and previous councils and also staff. And I just want to say thank you to them for their hard work, dedication, and consideration, and also to you, the citizens, who are patient with us and do have to bear the brunt of the decisions made. So it's very important for us to make sure you're well informed and that we get your input. We would caution that we can't please everybody in every case, but we will do our best to explain the rationale for the decisions that have that nature to them. Again, I thank you very much for your time and attention to this episode, and we'll be happy to hear from you anytime. And until next time I join you in this format, I wish everyone good health and good fortune.